Now we invite Reverend Liliana De Valle from the Grace Baptist Church and Pastor Peggy Bryan from St. Andrew's Episcopal Church to speak about the criminal justice system and the jail systems as well.
Good afternoon. And good afternoon again. Pope Francis wrote in The Joy of the Gospel, "We have created a throwaway culture which is now spreading. It is no longer simply about exploitation and oppression, but something new. Exclusion ultimately has to do with what it means to be a part of the society in which we live. Those excluded are no longer society's underside or its fringes or its disenfranchised. They are no longer even a part of it. The excluded are not the exploited, but the outcast, the leftovers." That is the attitude toward people who are involved in the criminal justice system. The Pope wrote about jail conditions, the deplorable conditions of detention which are observed in various parts of the planet are often genuinely inhuman and degrading deficiencies, often the result of the penal system, at other times due to the lack of infrastructure or of planning. While in more than a few cases, they represent the arbitrary and unscrupulous exercise of power over people deprived of freedom. I want to call your attention on one of the oldest stories in our Judeo-Christian tradition, and that is the story of Job. And the story of Job, rather than be read as an attempt to explain where pain and suffering come from, should be seen as a story of retributive justice as opposed to restorative justice. His friends wanted to know what he had done wrong to be suffering all the suffering he had. And he insisted, "I did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong." Because many times that kind of justice is very unjust. Instead, the story is about a man who was restored. Let us think about that, and let us thrive for a restorative society.
I'm reading the story of a mother who needs to remain anonymous for fear of retribution, retaliation towards her family and her son who's in custody. That right there is a story, but let me read you the details. As a parent who has had a child inside the Santa Clara County jails for several years, waiting to go to trial, I've come to see and learn many things I wish I never had to know. My experiences are common ones, the same ones that thousands of parents, family members, and friends have every day when they have someone they love inside our jails. Between the courts, the jails, the lawyers, the DA's office, the public defender's office, and other family responsibilities, people like me become exhausted, emotionally and spiritually drained, despondent, and financially strapped for resources. My life is spent in endless worry about my son's safety and health, his mental condition, his living conditions, his legal battles, and the lack of support. When he went to jail, I went right along with him. After the recent beating death in Main Jail North, it was 2 days before I received a call from my son. When I asked him how everyone was taking the news, he responded with surprise that I would even ask. He said, "We see people get beat up in here all the time. There are lots of guards that are like hammers looking for nails. None of us are surprised that someone died. You shouldn't be either." Like other families, I have heard my son's stories of beatings and abuse, of demeaning and dehumanizing treatment, of grievances resulting in little to no resolution, and the almost constant inference that they all lie. Aside from weekly visits, showers every other day, and the few hours he goes to a cell outside in the yard, he, like most people in our jails, have nothing to do most of the day. This is his life, day in and day out, for years on end. I have watched my son disappear into a system that seems to strive for the harshest and most punitive path they can find, rather than seek any way to offer rehabilitation and hope for a different future. I watch helplessly as his mind numbs and his health deteriorates. If he were to be released tomorrow, he would be totally unprepared to re-enter life outside, having been offered no new skills, no opportunities to move forward in a positive manner, and no expectation except that he will move on to prison and stay there. We live in a county that stresses harsh sentencing and difficult to impossible bail situations. What I see is mass incarceration and a pipeline to prison that disproportionately impacts low-income people of color. I do not see restorative justice, efforts towards innovation or rehabilitation, or systems seeking ways to support positive changes for those in custody. It does not do enough to help restore people to their families or community better than when they entered. Instead, it marginalizes far too many and places them in a downward cycle that is almost impossible to escape. Please, for families like mine, demand change.
Responding to the stories of this mother and son and the thousands of others with painful experiences with our criminal justice system, from unjust interaction with police on the street to inhumane conditions in the jails. We call on the Board of Supervisors and the Sheriff to act as community guardians by protecting the mental and physical health of all people in custody in county jails. Establish a permanent independent oversight of the jails. Provide the mental health services and readiness programming critical to support and develop the skills of those in custody to return to our communities as productive individuals.